and the report by Ms. Valean, harmonised requirements in the internal market on transparency of third countries' interest representation. I now give the floor to the rapporteur, Adina Vălean, for 4 minutes.
Thank you, Madam President, Madam Commissioner, ladies and gentlemen, dear colleagues. Complex political decision-making is not a flaw of democracy. It is one of its defining features. But complexity can obscure processes. And when things become hard to follow, trust becomes vulnerable. This is why transparency must be a shared political value, not a matter of right or left, but a matter of political necessity. And responsible policymakers should be able to understand, when meeting an individual or an organisation, what interests they represent. 8 in 10 Europeans are concerned about foreign country influence over the EU. So this directive is a first step to address this concern, a foundation for a potentially more ambitious framework in the future. As legislators, we have made some important changes and clarifications to bring more clarity and strength to the proposal. So let me now outline what our proposed changes actually deliver for citizens, for companies and for member states. First, the concrete result, an interoperable EU-wide interface. It will be possible to see all registered entities across Europe, entities providing interest representation services on behalf of third countries. National and regional registers will connect through a single technical infrastructure, making verification simple, fast and consistent. Second, the agreed text rests on minimum harmonisation. We set common EU standards without impacting member states that already have robust systems. We create a genuine level playing field while respecting national choices. Third, we ensured a low bureaucratic footprint. Member states may keep their current registers and authorities. Reporting requirements remain minimal for individuals and entities. The goal is transparency, not new layers of paperwork. Fourth, we build strong safeguards against abuse and stigmatisation. Registration is mandatory, but not always public. In very specific cases where disclosure could endanger an individual or an organisation because of the country they work for, we allow protection. This was essential and it is now clearly in the text. Fifth, we uphold high standards on fundamental rights. The directive respects human rights and fundamental freedoms throughout. We worked carefully, line by line, to ensure that this balance holds. Six, we kept proportionate sanctions. For failure of registration, we propose administrative sanctions. So, colleagues, this directive is not about ideology, it's not about suspicions, punishment, it is about ensuring that European democracy has the transparency it needs to remain strong in a difficult geopolitical environment. I thank all political groups, and especially the shadow rapporteurs, who engaged in very hard and constructive discussions and hard work, and I ask your support for tomorrow's vote. Thank you very much, Madam President.
Bardzo dziękuję. W imieniu Komisji głos zabierze...
Thank you very much. And now for the Commission, Executive Vice President Roxana Mînzatu.
Honourable members, Madam Rapporteur, thank you for the opportunity to exchange with you about this very important proposal. Democracy and the rights and freedoms associated with it are at the core of our societies. And there is no democracy without transparency and accountability. Instilling the transparency and openness in the way interests of third countries are represented in the European Union is essential to protect the integrity of our democratic space and to prevent foreign interference. We see member states more and more legislating or adopting measures in this area in a fragmented manner. And outside the European Union, we see countries such as Canada or Australia that have put in place legislation on this matter, and similarly, the OECD is increasingly addressing the issue of foreign influence. In this context, the proposal for a directive on interest representation carried out on behalf of third countries has been a flagship initiative of the 2023 Defence of Democracy package. This proposal has two objectives. Firstly, to improve the functioning of the internal market of interest representation activities carried out on behalf of third countries, creating a level playing field, reducing compliance costs for entities that seek to carry out interest representation activities on behalf of third countries across borders, and preventing regulatory arbitrage. And secondly, to enhance the integrity of and public trust in the Union's and Member States' democratic institutions by ensuring the transparency of interest representation activities carried out on behalf of third countries, and by improving the knowledge of the magnitude, trends and actors behind such activities. The proposed directive aims to regulate specific activities. These are interest representation activities impacting decision-making processes in the EU, carried out on behalf of third countries. It does so without distinctions on the type of entities, acknowledging that there is a wide variety of actors of interest representation activities that are active on our internal market. The proposal does not ban nor prohibit any conduct. It simply requires that activities affecting the core of our democratic processes are carried out transparently. This translates into targeted and proportionate requirements, including registration and record keeping. When doing so, the Commission paid particular attention to provide for strong safeguards to prevent potential negative impacts on the entities concerned, ensuring full respect for fundamental rights and democratic principles and values. As such, this proposal is radically different from any of the so-called foreign agent laws aiming at stigmatizing some entities and reducing their space to express their views. The proposal also minimizes the administrative burden, including by relying on different instruments. It will rely on the internal market information system funded with the EU budget, which allows to connect the national authorities quickly and easily and supports efficient and easy exchanges. I am aware of the hard work and extensive discussions that the IMCO committee has put into this proposal. I'd like to warmly thank the rapporteur and the political groups for their relentless efforts in finding compromise solutions. Now it is the moment for this House to secure a robust negotiating position ahead of the interinstitutional negotiations, once the Council will also reach its general approach. This directive is part of our instruments to ensure transparency and counteract interference. It is part of a broader agenda to strengthen democracy and to strengthen democratic resilience. And let me also stress in this context that the Commission has put forward last week the European Democracy Shield, which sets out a series of further measures to empower, to protect and to promote strong and resilient democracies across the European Union. These actions are aimed to boost our collective capacity to counter information manipulation and disinformation and to strengthen the overall democratic resilience of our societies. I am looking forward to hearing your contributions to this debate. Thank you.
Bardzo dziękuję.
Thank you very much. And now on behalf of the group of the European People's Party, Mr. Wouter Beke. 1 minute and a half.
Dank u wel, voorzitter. Thank you, President, ladies and gentlemen, Commissioner. Protecting our democracy has to be the highest priority. Democracy is under pressure, and it's our task to maintain protection. The threats that Europe needs to keep in its sights are coming from out with Europe. The dangerous mix of populism and nationalism, Trumpism, if you like, and we can see this banging at the door of Europe. And there are attempts also from within to undermine this. And this is why this file is so important. This directive is doing something quite clear. It is bringing in transparency over lobbying activities being carried out on behalf of third countries, no more, no less. Not a witch hunt, no general obligation for a registration that will stifle us. No, who is speaking on behalf of whom? And a direct compromise is understandable, to have an approach with minimum harmonisation so member states can go further and independent control. That's how we strengthen our democratic resilience without giving up on other democratic values of our society. And if you want to undermine democracy, you undermine confidence in democracy. So we need to have a first line of defence. Democracy, ladies and gentlemen, doesn't die overnight, but it's after many attempts that happens, and we have a task to avoid that.
Bardzo dziękuję, panie pośle, w imieniu grupy postępowego.
Thank you very much. And now, on behalf of the group of Socialists and Democrats in the European Parliament, Alex Agius-Saliba.
Vice President, our democracy thrives by transparency. We need to shed light on all the special interests and also lobbies that try to influence our policy. And this goes beyond third country interests. It's as much about corporate lobbies and all legitimate civil society organisations that provide us with useful advice. Our voters want to know who tries to influence us. Transparency builds trust that we can act on our conviction. We are here to serve the European people and no specific interest of anybody. This is why we as SND propose to turn this directive into a General Transparency Act, but our amendments unfortunately did not get the support of right-wing groups. Instead, we are left with a very targeted proposal that will deal with the internal market for third country interest representation. And this is good, because we need to open our eyes to the fact that there are campaigns by foreign powers to influence European and member states in their favour. At the same time, we need to make sure we prevent a chilling effect on civil society, for which several UN special rapporteurs have warned us. That is why only services which are economic in nature are and should be in the scope of this directive. It is in line with the legal basis, that of the functioning of the internal market. There is no carve-out for NGOs, and they will be covered only insofar as they deliver commercial services. But all non-profit activities executed based on charity, grants and subsidies will not be covered. On top of this, we have clear additional safeguards for activities in the interest of common good. The supervisor will enforce this directive, will be totally independent, and will limit the sanctions only to administrative fines, excluding potential criminal sanctions. The text is one that my group can support. It has the right balance between transparency needed on foreign influence in our democracy and the need to protect and support civil society that is doing democratic and legitimate work on policy from stigma or even prosecution. Thanks a lot.
Dziękuję, panie pośle, w imieniu grupy Patriotów.
Thank you very much. Now, on behalf of Patriots for Europe, Virginie Geron, 1 minute and a half.
Thank you, President. Colleagues, Madam Kyriakides, the Commissioner who was responsible for such a crisis under COVID has now participated in Davos without declaring her revenue. She also received money from the Bill Gates Foundation. Now it seems that all roads lead to Davos. Let me remind you of von der Leyen's speech on disinformation, saying it was worse than climate change or the war in Ukraine. Yesterday, Brussels wanted to intervene in elections on all levels. Today, they were attacking democracy. When I look at the text on transparency on lobbying, we can see who's behind this. It is Qatar to protect Soros. And now we look at the Soros-backed foundations, Madame Loiseau's organizations, Oxfam, and other NGOs such as Terre d'Asile. We can see how they are being targeted so that our business is the victims. We are looking at who financed the new Observer in 2014, and why are we suddenly interested in that? When the Commission provided 1.8 million euros on behalf of energy efficiency or to pay for new creches, it seems that this doesn't correspond to the stated goal of increasing democracy. Well, it seems that all we're doing now is supporting Opus Dei and Soros Foundation.
Thank you very much. And now on behalf of the European Conservatives and Reformists Group, George Piperea, for 1 minute.
Strategic contracts, corruption and untransparent lobby, Qatar Gate, caviar diplomacy and revolving doors. All of this shows how easily foreign money and influence penetrate the European institutions. Obscure networks and foreign governments are trying to model our decisions behind closed doors through masked lobbies, hidden consultancy, and hidden consultants who influence decisions and votes. Everything is presented as fact-checking or technical assistance. We need transparent lobby registers. We need clear statements by these sources, especially when it comes to quasi-NGOs, entities that act as soft power for foreign governments, especially because our democracies are vulnerable in front of this kind of manipulation. Transparency is the true barrier against hidden influence and corruption. We have to act in very obvious light because our citizens need to know where our money goes.
W imieniu Grupy Renew Europe.
Thank you very much. And now on behalf of the Renew Europe Group, Dainius Žalimas.
Authoritarian regimes today use influence as a strategic weapon. Their goal is clear: to divide Europeans, weaken our institutions, and undermine confidence in democracy itself. We cannot allow this. That is why we must support the ambition to strengthen transparency and accountability in interest representation carried out on behalf of third countries. Europe needs clear, harmonized rules that expose manipulation while protecting our democracies. We cannot be compromised by existing essentially different rules or absence of them in member states. And let me stress this point. This directive is the opposite of the so-called foreign agents law. It focuses on activities, not on funding. It imposes no criminal sanctions, no discriminatory labels, and no prohibitions on legitimate advocacy. It targets activities carried out on behalf of foreign governments with independent supervision and full respect for fundamental rights. Democracy must be able to defend itself. Thank you.
Dziękuję bardzo, panie pośle, w imieniu grupy.
Thank you very much. Now on behalf of the group of the Greens, European Free Alliance, Alexandra Giese, for a minute and a half.
Vielen Dank, Frau Präsidentin, Frau.
Thank you, President, Commissioner, colleagues. Foreign influence aimed at destroying our democracy is a real risk that we have to stand up against. The Commission could do an awful lot. There are so many relevant issues, botnets which decide from abroad what we can see on the internet here and what we can't, algorithms as well which are manipulated by that, in transparent online markets, hybrid warfare, corruption and the role of cryptocurrencies. All of that could have helped doing something about that would have helped protect democracy and avoid this in Europe. But apparently the Commission and people didn't want this. They wanted a transparency register for all of those people who are representing their interests in the EU, including exactly those foreign companies who are not wanting to apply our digital rules but do all the rest. And that's why we've heard people talking about blackmail. But obviously the Commission wanted that with the Conservative side of the House. There's a lot of legal uncertainty and that limits the role for civil society as well. I think we need to clarify, we need to look at the definitions, which could avoid the worst. But we're nonetheless worried that this law will not affect foreign intervention interference and influence, but will really damage the civil society in Europe when we really need them for.
Thank you very much. And now on behalf of the Left Group in the European Parliament, Leila Shaibi for a minute and a half.
Merci, Madame la Présidente, Madame la...
Thank you very much, President, Commissioner. This is a debate on the defence of our democracy, which is essential all over Europe. We are seeing all sorts of measures taken, and the old world is suffering. We need to combat the far right and the attempts to undermine democracy on our continent. Unfortunately, with this text, the European Union is not dealing with those people who are undermining our parliament. On the contrary, they're providing weapons to them to attack those who they don't like. It's copy-paste on the Hungarian or Georgian foreign agent laws with one objective: Mr. Orban, Mr. Fico, Mr. Meloni, Miss Meloni, pointing the finger, stigmatizing those in civil society who they don't like. We wanted to turn this text into a genuine General Transparency Act against all lobbies to avoid destabilization coming from abroad, mirroring what happened in Qatargate, which shook the foundations of our institution, but that was rejected. Rejecting this text send it back to the Commission for them to do their homework. That was refused as well. So maybe the Parliament proposal is less bad than the original, but let's not forget a bad version of a bad law is still a bad law. Listening to what you say about civil society organisations, lobbyists and defenders of democracy, and reject this text, please.
Thank you very much. And now on behalf of the Europe of Sovereign Nations Group, Milan Uhrik.
Dear colleague, you don't have to run away. What package on the protection of democracy you are speaking about? You in Brussels do just the opposite of what you call democracy. You have abolished and you don't recognize the results of elections in Romania. You want to abolish the veto right in the Council, and European commissioners are not elected officials who would like to command member states or governments that come from democratic elections. You call democracy only when you are in power, but this is not the real democracy. And if you really want to help European democracy, truly help, start first of all with listening and trying to understand other opinions. Stop listening to yourself only. Thank you.
Thank you very much. The next speaker is Regina Doherty. 1 minute and a half.
President, Commissioner, people rightly expect high standards in politics, but the revelations about immoral or seemingly corrupt practices really do enrage people, and they damage the trust that we have in politics. And if people have no longer got trust in politics, well then democracy in itself is going to be undermined. We know that in the past there have been particular challenges when it comes to lobbying from countries outside of the EU, and so for that reason we need really clear rules, transparent supervisors, reduced bureaucracy and proper implementation. And we also have to uphold people's fundamental rights, because it's important to recognise that representations can be legitimate, and third country groups, including civil society, have a right to express their positions. So we need to make sure that the EU remains open for engagement, to dialogue, to hearing the voices of our neighbours, while rightly clamping down on abuses and illegal practices. Many member states already have their own rules, and it's right that they can build a minimum standard, but we set the standard at an EU level. On a particular personal note, one place where I really feel that we must ensure that the voices of civil society continue to be heard is Northern Ireland. Northern Ireland is unfortunately part of a third country dragged out of the EU against a majority opinion, and people in Northern Ireland, however, continue to have a birthright to EU citizenship should they want it. So Northern Ireland remains part of the Customs Union. But while Northern Ireland no longer sends representatives to this House or to our other institutions, we should ensure that the voice of Northern Ireland's civic society organisations continue to be heard. Thank you.
Thank you very much. The next speaker is Elisabeth Grossmann for 1 minute.
Democracy, the rule of law and fundamental rights. These are the foundations of the EU, but recent experience has showed that our rights are under pressure. Hate and distrust are rampant, and foreign actors are trying to influence and destabilize our unity. In time of growing geopolitical tension, we need international cooperation, but we cannot allow for third countries to implement or interfere in our policies by hidden actors. We need transparency where it is necessary, a targeted influence of third countries on our political processes. At the same time, we have managed to ensure that the framework and the content of this directive cannot be turned against our own civil society, against our NGOs. Even if some people in this House would have liked that to be the case, democracy survives from in the light of critical voices, and these should not be silenced.
The next speaker is Erno Schaller-Barros for 1 minute.
Madam President, ladies and gentlemen, it's incredible for me that the left group in Parliament sees stigmatisation everywhere. If we're looking at third country organisations, do they constitute a real threat? Good example is the George Soros organisation, in fact. They are trying to have foreign influence. They're quite happy to use this system to exploit it. And what about transparency there? I think that this package constitutes all sorts of hidden dangers. Talking about registration in a country, carried out in a country where they carry out their activities, that means that this organisation can be active in any country in Europe, and that means, for reasons of security, it's not really acceptable. The Commission is continually trampling on the country.
Mr. Mantovani for 1 minute.
Grazie, Presidente.
Thank you, President. Commissioner, colleagues. Registering the interests of foreign states in Europe, well, Commissioner, I'm in favour of anything which strengthens our security and sovereignty, but this proposal, I feel, doesn't go far enough. Do you really think that malign interference organised by hostile services will register with us? I think we're mixing up a security and intelligence issue with one of bureaucratic compliance, undermining civil and economic liberties in so doing. In fact, there'll be exemptions for those companies, those bodies, which maybe don't directly come from a foreign country, but they are subservient to foreign interests hostile to Europe. Hidden funds, Sharia-linked questions, the Muslim Brothers, Hamas, those opaque bodies which support trafficking in human beings and are conducting hybrid warfare against Europe. Commissioner, this proposal, is it going to protect us against this type of danger as well, or will it simply be bureaucracy? Thank you.
Thank you very much. And now Zala Tomasic for 1 minute.
Thank you very much, Chair, dear Commissioner, colleagues. When talking about transparency on the internal market, this is not just a technical question. More stands behind this. We're talking about influence of third countries in the European Union, which is becoming bigger and bigger. They are trying to influence our political processes. I agree with stricter rules and more unified rules when it comes to interests of third countries in the European Union. I hope this report will be passed tomorrow. However, I want to be clear. We need transparency for everybody who wants to influence politics of the European Union. This means it should also apply for NGOs. The civil society has an important role, of course. However, they should be subject to the same rules. We need to have transparency regarding who is financing who and why.
Thank you very much. The next speaker is Tomislav Sokol for 1 minute.
Vice President, Commissioner, colleagues, the European Union cannot be a victim of damaging foreign interference, which not only come from far away, but from neighbouring countries such as Serbia. This shows that a state outside of the EU can destabilise our neighbourhood, and especially when it comes to a candidate country. We can see that in Montenegro, where pro-Serbian parties and the Serbian Orthodox Church follow this kind of damaging policy. We think that this package protects our European Union, and the message is clear. We want to protect the European Union from manipulation by foreign actors. If we want a secure and safe Europe, we need to send the clear message that projects such as the Serbian World and interference into European Union policies are not acceptable. Thank you.
And now Michał Szczerba for 1 minute.
Szanowna Pani Przewodnicząca.
Madam President, ladies and gentlemen of the House, democracy is under pressure. This is what is believed by the substantial majority of EU citizens who fear intervention and impact on elections. That's why the package for democracy and defense of democracy is a necessity, not just an option to be considered. But I'm very happy that this is all going in the same vein as the Polish presidency has charted it out, and certainly the transparency is a measure of democracy. Rules must be respected, and various programs for democracy must be strengthened, including Agora EU. We speak about smaller non-governmental administrations. We are very happy about the idea of setting up the European Centre for Resilience.
Thank you very much. We now move on to the Catch the Eye. I give the floor to Mr. López Aguilar.
Vicepresidenta Minzatu, de nuevo,
President, Vice President, this is a further step towards meeting the Charter on Fundamental Rights, because transparency and access to documents, the right to good governance, stands in Articles 40 and 41. But we've learned from past experiences, we had a few last time round, S&D is prepared to vote in favour of this directive in order to strengthen transparency and accountability in terms of interest representation. But in any case, a regulatory body such as the European Parliament not only has the right, but the duty to listen to those interests which could be legitimately affected by our legislative action. So we're not talking about stigmatisation, we're talking about strengthening the principle of accountability. That's something else that we've learnt as well, the need to have a moral code, an ethical code in this Parliament, which still needs to be rolled out because of the resistance, despite the interinstitutional belief in this, but the resistance from within this body. Thank you.
Arvoisa puhemies, uskaltaako kukaan?
Madam President, does anyone in this room dare to claim that there is currently no money to buy politicians in Europe? I wouldn't dare. Non-European actors have shown their readiness to take unscrupulous action to promote their own goals. Europe, for its part, has shown that here too there are decision-makers who are ready to ignore all their values in return for money. A few years ago, a corruption scandal put heavy suspicions at the centre of how Qatar, Mauritania and Morocco had bribed several European MPs to influence EU policies. This year, a case was made public in which Chinese Huawei was suspected to having paid European MEs to defend Huawei's interests. These are just the uncovered cases. More than ever, we need to shed light on the EU complex structures. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Now, Mr. Kelleher.
Nathan Gill, a former member of the European Parliament, a member of UKIP, sat on those seats from 2014 to 2020. He was jailed for 10 years in the Old Bailey last week for taking bribes from Russia, Russian money paid by oligarchs to make speeches in this chamber promoting Russia and denigrating Ukraine. It sounds familiar. It sounds very familiar from those benches over there. Oleg Valean was a Russian who promoted Mr. Gill to make these continuous speeches. And we have to accept that some of the commentary in this House goes beyond what should be allowed with regard to defending the democracy that upholds this place. And it behoves us all to call out those that are supporting political groups and parties and governments that want to undermine the democracy in this House and the European Union and all that we share and the values that underpin it. And it is shameful that we have this continual diatribe from over there with regard to being pro-Russian, anti-Ukraine and undermining the basic principles of this House. We need transparency, but we also need honesty.
Thank you very much, Mr. Oliveira.
Thank you, President. Today we were talking about a defence of democracy package which very often comes up hard against the practice in the EU. It seems to be an empty package. It is an attempt to tackle the foreign agents, but only those that the EU doesn't like. It talks about the risk of foreign interference, but it doesn't talk about the interference by economic interests, national interests, those that run counter to the interests of the poverty of the people. It talks about democracy, but it doesn't talk about the traffic of influences via the structure of lobbying, which we saw so clearly in relation to the Commission and COVID. We look at the military and economic policies led by the government of Italy, the right-wing government of Italy and Hungary. We're here talking about defending democratic values, but it seems this is simply an attempt to silence those who are speaking out against the promotion of war and the militarisation of the EU structures. This is not a defence of democracy package. It is nothing.
Thank you very much. And now Mr. Mazurek.
Please, are you really going to give us lessons about democracy? This is laughable. Just look at what the European Commission has started currently against Slovakia. Do you know what democracy is? When people freely choose their representatives in the national parliament. There was an amendment to our constitution adopted in the Slovak parliament stating that there are only two genders, two sexes, that in these matters the Slovak judges will be above European judgments from the European Court of Justice, and nobody from Brussels will dictate us how are we to deal with these matters. And the Commission has started an infringement procedure against Slovakia, saying that it's against democracy. Now tell me, what is more democratic than the adoption of amendment to Constitution? On top of it, what we are stating now in the Constitution is stipulated also in the treaties. We who believe in democracy should be protecting anybody who is abiding by this principle, but you attack us continuously.
Mr. Lucas Zipper.
Democracy needs education. So let me first take this opportunity, Mr. Urik, to tell you about the concept of indirect legitimacy in democracy. Mr. Mazurek, I told you this last plenary already, so you can share your notes with Mr. Urik maybe. In a democracy, it is possible that the people elect a body that then elects other institutions. That's indirect legitimacy within a democratic system. And this is not undemocratic, because there is no democratic system in Europe that has this system of an indirect election of government bodies. Indirect legitimacy, Mr. Urik. Mr. Mazurek, the application of EU law, the member states of the European Union democratically gave up their right to have laws and even constitutional laws that are higher than the European Union law. I hope you take this home. I hope you go through your notes at the end of this evening, and maybe tomorrow you wake up enlightened, filled by the feeling and the joy for democracy. Thank you very much.
Dziękuję bardzo. W imieniu Thank you very much. On behalf of the Commission, I give the floor to Madam Commissioner Mînzatu. You have the floor.
Thank you, President, honourable members. Thank you for the debate, for keeping the protection of our democracy so high on our public agenda. An EU response to the commonly shared threat of third country interference is needed. A level playing field is necessary for economic players to carry out their activities in the internal market with a stable and predictable framework. Transparency should be ensured with common standards across the Union. This is essential to avoid forum shopping and loopholes which can be abused. Accountability is necessary for those who seek to influence public decision-making. And we should strive for a common EU approach that upholds EU values, fundamental rights and proportionality. With this proposal, the co-legislators have the opportunity to contribute to setting standards not only in the European Union but also on a global scale on how to address covert foreign influence in a coherent, balanced and proportionate way, fully respecting fundamental rights and democratic values. I am convinced that the best way to protect democracy is through democratic means, through transparency, accountability, through informed and empowered citizens. The Commission is looking forward to continuing the common work to achieve these very important objectives. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Commissioner. Now, our rapporteur, Madam Valean. You have 2 minutes.
Madam President, again, Madam Commissioner, dear colleagues, thank you for all your contribution to this debate.
Благодаря ви за приноса към този дебат. Отново ми прави, отбелязвам, че
regarding the representation of interests of third countries remain the fact that it created a lot of expectation. A lot of people imagined that this is going to solve the illegal interference or it's aiming to do so. It's not that. It's just an exercise of transparency in a European Union in which we have too little information, transparent information, about who is paying for lobby activities meant to influence policy making. At the beginning, the Commission said that less than 1,000 entities are going to be affected by this directive, because this is what we know. It is just a niche. It's just about the entities who are paid to lobby for by sponsors originating as foreign governments or other organizations in which a foreign government has a direct interest. So it's not aimed at solving all the problems around the foreign influence. We have an ecosystem of institutions in member states at European level who are going to deal with the legal representation. What is aimed to do this directive is just to open a window to show people who is paid by whom to influence the policy making. It's legitimate, it's simple, is something we can count on, and it's not targeting specific entities. It's just going to ask all those individuals, NGOs, companies who are conducting such activities to register and show exactly who they are representing. It is proportionate, it is minimum harmonization, and it is something fair and asked by our citizens. I really hope that you will support tomorrow this proposal. And again, thank you very much to all those who have worked to bring the directive in this latest form. Thank you very much.
Dziękuję pani poseł. Thank you very much. And now I close the debate. The vote will take place tomorrow. Let's proceed to discuss the next point on the agenda, the statement of the Commission and the Council of Fishing Rights for 2026, Sustainability of Fish Populations, Marine Ecosystems and Coastal Communities. On behalf of the Council, we will hear Mari Bier, the European Affairs Minister. Over to you.